Hey, it's Brad and CA. Today on Stuck in the 80s, we're turning the tables a little bit, and the tech nerd is going to interview the journalist. So, just in case you're wondering, joining me today is the creator and host of the Stuck in the 80s podcast, and more importantly for today, the author of a new book, Stuck in the 80s 20 Years of Conversations with the Pop Culture Icons Who Defined a Decade. Steve Spears, thanks for coming on today, man.
Gee, Brad, thanks for inviting me.
It's like I invited you to your own living room so I could drink one of your beers.
It's like an intervention or something.
It's worse than that, buddy. We're here to sell books. It's not about money, it's about making money.
Okay, whatever you say. I am an open book, so as you know, so I await your queries with much enthusiasm.
As well you should. So look, I know you've been doing the podcast circuit while we wait for the buzz to build to the late night TV show levels where you get invited to go to New York and be on those shows. But I just want to make sure that the audience of our podcast also got a chance to toast your success as your first book is released. I got to ask you, how many podcast interviews have you done thus far, not counting this one?
Oh, geez. 10.
Dang. That's like 3 months worth of shows for us, man.
Then there's 3 more to go this week.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I will ask you if you can share the links to those so that we can all listen to them.
Yeah, sure. In fact, I just posted one a few minutes ago. Not that helps people because this is not a live podcast.
No, but
yeah,
you know.
No. I rediscovered the '80s. Just posted something. D&D '80s. I was with them last night. That was a live streaming podcast. Yeah, there's a couple more. Our Town podcast is on. I gotta stay up till 9 o'clock on Thursday for that one. That'll be interesting.
What?
Yeah.
Oh boy. West Coasters?
I presume.
That's fantastic. I'm glad that the 80s podcasting community is lifting you up on on their shoulders and carrying you around the town square where you deserve to be. I do want to mention before we get too much further here that Steve brought 50 copies of the book onto our recent trip aboard the 2026 voyage of the 80s cruise, and they sold out the first day the cruise shop was open. Bang.
Yeah, that was a little crazy.
When people ask me, is the hype real? I think the hype is real. Get on board the train, people. This baby's leaving the station. If we play this right, you'll be listening to this, or you have the opportunity to listen to this the day the book is released, which is March 11th, 2026. It's a red letter day in the history of science, to quote Doc Brown.
Yep. You know what's funny? You and I walked up to the merch store on the Royal Caribbean ship because we just wanted to kind of peek in and see what the book looked like on the shelf. And there was like a 45-minute wait to get into the merch store to buy the book and other stuff. So it sold out, I think, in 5 hours.
That's fantastic.
That's as many as I could carry. I think people forget. Not people forget. I didn't finish editing it until the beginning of February. So we turned it around from the last day we edited it to the day that I got them in my hands was 2 or 3 weeks. So we just barely got him on the boat.
I just want to know, did Biff get the second coat of wax on the carb when he brought the box of books into your dining room?
There wasn't even time for, you know what's funny? Because that scene kind of resonates. I think when you're growing up and you don't really, how many people dream of being authors? Probably very few. But that's the one scene you think about is you think about the scene in Back to the Future, where Marty's dad has his first novel published and it comes in a box. And that's exactly how it happened. The except for the fact that it wasn't the guy polishing my car, but it was the postman rang the doorbell and he's like, I got this big box for you, puts it in my arms. I carried it in and you slice it open and you pull out the book. It's just exactly like you think it would be.
What makes Brad cry? That's remarkable. That's remarkable. I love that. So let's get into it, shall we, Mr. Spears?
Fire away.
I have questions. You said to me maybe it's not several times, you said to me multiple times that this book is not a memoir. So if it's not a memoir, how would you describe this book?
That's a good question. If it's not, it is not a memoir. It is a recollection of the highlights of the interviews that we've done over the last 20 years. It's the interviews that stuck with me. But what I tried to do is I tried to make them relatable to every one of us. We all have a Duran Duran story. We all have an AC/DC story. these are my stories related to the podcasts, that we did, the interviews. So I'm going to tell the story about how I went to see AC/DC when I was 14 or 15 years old, and my dad drove me there and I got high, and, which is completely inappropriate at that age, but I did, and how I acted and what I said to him. But I mean, I tell that story around the Brian Johnson interview, which was one of
Right.
the first great interviews that we ever did. So it's memoir-esque. It is. I'm telling the story of Stuck in the '80s, and I'm showing people what it's like to have to interview your heroes, not to have to interview your heroes. I mean, I got to, and I don't think people know what that's like, and I wanted to explain how special it is.
Okay. I mean, one of the things I noticed is it's there's not a lot of the Steve Spears story in there. There's the Spears story as it relates to the interviews or the interview subjects. And I'm curious to know, like, how did you decide, like, well, this is where I'm going to set the dial on sharing? Because I think people, like, this is something I know you and I have talked about. When I joined the podcast, I'm like, it shouldn't be about me. It should be about the '80s. But you realize that people want to connect to you and they need, otherwise, all I'm doing is reading you a Wikipedia article. So there has to be some of you in there. How did you decide where to dial that out?
Yeah, just the history of doing this show, doing 800 episodes that we've done. You sort of know what works and what doesn't work, what stories make sense and which ones don't. I think my mom's going to be real disappointed. I think my whole family's going to be disappointed when they read this book because I think they're thinking it's a memoir and they're expecting all these stories of me
Uh,
growing up, and that's not what it is. It's a story about my relationship to the people that I interviewed, and I don't have a relationship with everybody that's in the book, but I have a revelation about everybody that's in the book.
okay.
So some stories are like when we talk about Duran Duran, and I tell the story of wanting to go see them on the Seven and the Ragged Tiger tour with my girlfriend back in 1984. My mom forbidding it because she did not like my girlfriend because she smoked. So
Oh.
she was a ne'er do well, and so the one concert I wanted to see more than anything, she wasn't going to let me go, and that's the sort of mental splinter for me that I carry through. And so when I talk to a Simon Le Bon or an Andy Taylor, both of whom are in the book, those are the stories that come to mind. Here's
Hmm.
why Duran Duran means so much to me. It was because at one point in my life, I wanted to see them more than anything, and I was inexplicably told no. And so,
Thanks, Mom. You know what,
yeah,
Steve? Don't say hi to your mom for me this time.
I'm sure she will claim that she does not remember that story, but she has selective memory these days about things that are traumatizing to me, and that's one of them. But that's kind of how I did it. I mean, sometimes I may have overshared in the book a little bit. I mean, I getting high at the AC/DC concert probably wasn't the smartest thing to reveal to people. Or
I think the statute of limitations is probably well past us at this point.
there's other stories in there that people who know me real well will still be reading for the first time, and it'll turn some heads. But it's only in the context of making you understand the importance of the interview.
Okay. Okay. No, that makes sense. So, was there a precipitating event or what was it that led you to think, hey, I'm going to write a book about Stuck in the '80s? Is it just, I've always wanted to be a writer? I know you look up to the writers that you look up to. Like, what was the nugget that caused you to, like, get me a pen and some paper. We're going to do this.
There's several layers to that question, and I'll try to keep them focused and concise.
Boring.
I went to college not intending to be a journalist. I was trying to be an accountant, and I learned that I know nothing. I have no skill for economics or math, and so therefore maybe accounting wasn't the direction I should go in. And I found my way over to journalism, and I wanted to be a writer. And I had some bad experiences with the student newspaper that shifted me over to editing. And I spent my entire career then pretty much as an editor, as a
Okay.
copy editor, as a
Okay.
line editor, a news editor, online editor, all those things. So I've never been a full-time writer. Um, there was a time, but I grew up admiring writers. I mean, Hunter S. Thompson, Ernest Hemingway. Um, I, there was a time though, about 2.5 years ago, that my wife Melissa was at a book fair, an
Hmm.
author's fair. She wrote a memoir and it came out. It was a memoir about all her single days dating in New York City. And we were at a author's fair in Tampa. And so I was there helping out while she was selling books. And someone who knew me came up and started talking about the podcast and said, I can't believe you haven't written a book. And I think seeing Melissa there at the author's fair was like the final spark where I just said, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I went back to our hotel room that night and I started writing what would become the Duran Duran chapter, with the aforementioned
You may not go.
cannot go. Elisa is bad news for you. I don't think I've ever said her name before. It feels good. Cleansing.
Get it out there. Get it out there.
Elisa. But no, I think that's what started it. And then it took 2 years, two incredibly frustrating years where I
Mm.
wasn't sure where it was going or what shape it was going to take. And then suddenly it just started to slowly come together, and I could see the vision through it. And
Okay.
that was a wonderful feeling. I'll tell you that.
I mean, that was one of my next questions is like, how did the arc start to form up? And did you come to a tipping point where it's like, oh, I see it. I see all I have to do. It just has to come into my fingers. Give me a keyboard.
Yeah. So what I was starting to do is I have all these interviews that we've done, but they're all audio.
Hmm.
And so what I started doing was I started sending them out to be transcribed professionally, not
Hmm.
AI or anything. So I wanted to read them. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to listen to them. I can't stand the sound of my own voice, but I wanted to.
Even
I
after
wanted to.
800 episodes.
Yeah, I don't. I really don't. But I wanted to read them, and so I started sending them out little bit by little bit because it's not the cheapest thing in the world to do. And I would read them, and then I'd write a chapter about that. Here's my Andy Taylor chapter, and then I'd send out my Simon LeBon one, or I'd send out my Kenny Loggins one, and come back, read it, write a chapter. But what I started finding out was the way I remembered the interviews going wasn't the way I was seeing them in print. Like something had changed.
Oh.
There was like this extra layer of perspective that I had reading these for the first time in 15 years. And instead of just thinking that in my head, I decided to write down how I felt. Like I hated this interview then. I like it now. This person's being very true to themselves. And I didn't appreciate it then. I didn't see it then. I was looking
Mm.
at,
You
you have
were looking at one
expectations.
aspect of it. Yeah.
When you're doing an interview, you're listening to the answers, you're expecting certain answers, you're looking at your notes, trying to think what the next question is going to be, and you don't always hear what they're saying, like really hear it. And I think that's what changed when I was writing it, is I really started to understand what they were telling me, and that is what I tried to put into the book. And so when I had a revelation at the end of a interview in the book, I wrote it down. Like here's how I feel about it now, and here's how it's changed the way that I am writing now.
So if you didn't listen to the interviews, because I know there are interviews that didn't make the book. If you didn't listen to the interviews before you sent them out, how did you choose what you sent? Was it just based on that recollection of how it went, and you thought how this is going to fit into, or this is important enough that I need to include it? Like, what was the grading mechanism for what got sent to be transcribed?
Well, I mean, some are no brainers, like Steve Perry
Yeah,
or Dennis DeYoung or Kenny Loggins, Brian Johnson. Those were ones that I knew. I remember at
yeah,
the
those are tent
time.
poles. Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously.
But what I started thinking was, okay, how many people have I interviewed that are in the Rock Hall of Fame? And I know you hate the Rock Hall of Fame,
I'm not a huge fan, but that's okay.
but there's been maybe 12 or 15. The number grows every year, the number of people that I've interviewed, because bands get inducted. So I started going through going, well, okay, I talked to Nancy Wilson. I talked to Stuart Copeland. I talked to, you know, Ross Valerie of Journey. And so I started putting these things through. I remembered nothing about what Stuart Copeland and I talked about.
Oh, that's a
Nothing.
great interview. I love that interview.
Um, so I put it in there and I read it and I was like, oh my God, he said all these amazing things. I have no recollection of it. It's just when you do 800 shows, you
Yeah.
just
You
don't.
don't have room in the filing cabinet of your brain to hold it all in there.
And then other ones like Weird Al, I remember thinking at the time, this is not a very good interview. Like, I don't know that I'm learning anything. But then when I read the transcript, I'm like, oh, there's some nuggets in there.
Hmm.
And some of the interviews that I did, I would send out a whole thing, and I'd only get one little tiny story from it. So I thought, well, let's just do one chapter where it's just the short stories, like really short stories. Like it's just going to
Oh,
be Joe Elliott of Def Leppard's going to tell us a story, and or Nancy Wilson's going to tell us a story, or Stan Ridgway is going to tell us a story. So I tried to I took the pressure off myself. Like I'm not going to write a full chapter about everyone. Not there's only a handful of people who get a full chapter.
right.
So the Martha Quinns, uh,
Yeah.
Martha Quinn, Huey Lewis, Dennis DeYoung. I think they all got their own. I don't know who else did, Brian, but no, everyone else is part of a chapter of a larger theme.
Okay. So let me ask you, you said you had wanted to be a writer. How was the writing process different in reality and execution than what you thought it was going to be? Were there things that surprised you about the process of pulling this into words on paper?
Yeah, the thing about so the writing that I have done, I mean, it's not like I haven't written
Sure.
in
You wrote a blog post at least one a day for like a decade.
for a decade. I've probably written thousands of articles over my career, but that's a drop in the bucket compared to a full time writer. A lot of what I've trained myself to do is write for digital,
Okay.
and when you're doing digital, my philosophy is only write as much as you need to get your point across, and then stop.
Yeah, get in and get out. Yeah.
You don't have to fill a space in digital. If
This
all
is how
you
many
want to,
column inches I need today, Steve.
right, you don't have to spread something out. So I taught myself to write tight.
Okay. Yeah, be succinct, get in, get out.
When I sat down to write the book, I realized I had to, it's not like I had a certain number of pages I wanted to fill, but I wanted to tell the story more completely.
Hmm.
And so I would agonize. I would write the conversation part first, like me and Martha Quinn talking about something. And then I would go back and write the introduction and then the conclusion. So that's sort of the process I had
Okay.
is I would sort of build the meat of it and then the two loaves of bread or whatever.
Bread.
That's sort of how I did it. And then even then, as I was editing the book, I mean, I must have beat myself up pretty badly when I went back and started rereading when I said, "Oh my God, these are all the wrong words." And I really agonized it. I know I've told you this a few times. It's the toughest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, the toughest thing I've ever done, period. Like, I don't even know what would come in second to this. So
Were there logistical challenges or dare I say emotional challenges to overcome as you pulled this together?
there was um, a physical challenge that I had. I was writing the book, and frankly, I was getting a little frustrated by it because I didn't see the forest through the trees or the trees
Okay.
through the forest.
Hmm.
And I was a couple times just ready to say, you know what? I don't think it's worth this much frustration because I really feel like I've hit a wall. And then I nearly died. As most of the listeners know, back in June, I had a cardiac event. I was in the hospital for 8 days with AFib and chronic kidney disease and kidney failure and what else? Near lung failure. On top, I had more specialists in my room any given hour than probably anybody in the hospital. And I think it was during those 8 days where I kind of realized that you don't have forever to figure this stuff out. That things are finite.
Yeah.
Everything is finite. And I think I focused as a result of that. And then when I
Okay.
came out of the hospital and I sat back down at the computer, there was a clarity that I had that I
Hmm.
didn't have before. And that helped me push it over the top of the hill and get it done.
So, what would you say was the hardest section or chapter of this for you to write? Like, what was the most challenging piece of writing you had to encounter here?
There there are a couple. Um, there's several interviews that made me very emotional when they happened. Actress Debbie Foreman walked me through a breakup. That's the famous breaking up in the '80s episode. That's a tough one to read through and to live through because that was a tough time. Every breakup is tough. And what's the famous line from Tom Cruise in Cocktail? Things always end badly, otherwise they wouldn't
But
end.
they wouldn't end.
Because God knows we saw that enough times on the '80s cruise this
It's
year.
been that day again, Steve.
Yeah. The 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 John Parr interview because
Hmm.
he, I kind of lost it a little bit towards the end of that. Kind of wouldn't say I wept, but I was feeling extremely moist and wistful.
He was a very giving and very kind interview.
Yes. But the chapter I rewrote the most was Steve Perry. It's the final chapter in the book, and it's the chapter where it all comes together for me, like what it's all about. It, it the themes become clear to me finally, and they did so through a Journey song called "Patiently" that I heard on repeat in my head the night before I interviewed him back in, I think it was 2012, 2011. Uh, it was going through my brain as I went to sleep that night. It was in my brain when I woke up the next morning. Going through my head when I picked up the phone to talk to him. And then when I wrote the chapter, it returned the song. And it was almost like a roadmap
Hmm.
showing me, like, where the destination was. And I think that realization to me was a little overwhelming. I will admit I had a hard time writing that through for lack of a better word, through the tears.
Hmm.
And when I first read that end of the book to Melissa, I really had a hard time. I did not do a good job of holding back my emotions. It was, it's like the end of Field of Dreams where, oh, eases pain, talking about you. No, Ray, it's you. It felt like that kind of moment to me
Ooh.
when it all came together at the very end. And I don't expect everyone to find that moment as clarifying as it was for me.
Sure.
Just everybody has their own Steve Perry moment, and maybe that's the moral of the story.
Yeah. So we talked quite a bit over the last, well, it kind of ended at the beginning of February, but January, we were talking a lot about the editing process.
Uh,
And I'm just curious, like, what was the last thing that ended up on the cutting room floor?
oh, gee. um, uh,
And if it's a story about me, you should lie. No.
no, I mean, up till the very end, I couldn't decide uh, who do I need to who do I need to push in and push out. I
Hmm.
really wanted Taylor Dane to be in there because she was the most recent interview I did. I really kind of at the very last moment I did that interview with Alan Frew of Glass Tiger, and that one was such an interesting interview.
Yeah.
I really wanted to squeeze him in there, but we were way too far along in the process. There were um, there were some the things that the last thing that we trimmed. The last thing that we trimmed. I remember there are some lines that Brian Johnson said that if you are of a church going persuasion you might find somewhat offensive.
Hmm.
And just, you know, he said, Jesus Christ, really. And my editor asked me, don't you think we can live without this? And I really agonized over it because he
Hmm.
said it. And,
Yeah.
but I'm like, does it really add anything to it? No. So, I mean, that was the literal last thing I took out of the book
Okay.
was
Wow.
Brian Johnson saying Jesus Christ was the last thing I took out of it. But uh, I don't remember the last interview I cut. I mean, I know at the very end, I was still like, oh gosh, I should put John Waite in here. I can't believe I don't have John Waite in here. Man, do I want to put Mike Score from Flock of Seagulls? Let me go read that transcript one more time. That's the kind of thing I was agonizing about. Oh
Sure.
crap, I can't believe I didn't even think about so and so. But no, sadly it was the words Jesus Christ.
Okay, we'll put a pin in that. We'll come back to an aspect of that in a minute. But I want to ask you, what do you think 1985 Steve Spears would say about the life you've built around this podcast and around this love of that decade? After you explained to him what a podcast was.
I'm so tired of explaining what a podcast is.
When's it on, Steve?
That's the one good thing. You and I have been doing this so long now that we don't have to explain it anymore. But for the first 10 years of the podcast, we had to explain it all the time, all the
Yeah.
time.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, what would I, not a week goes by where I don't think about what the teenage version of me would think of me today. Um, I comically like to say he would like to beat the shit out of me. Um, I, in reality, I think he'd be pretty amazed. I think I was a kid who was buying records and watching MTV, and never in a million years would I have imagined that I would be interviewing so many of these people, and to call some of them friends, like Terry Nunn, for example, who I consider a friend. Uh, I, I think he would be. I don't think he could have conceived of it. Um, I think that's why it kind of works. At the heart of it all, I'm still a 15-year-old who loves music and quoting 80s movies.
Yeah.
I'm never going to stop doing that. I'm going to
Yeah.
be on my deathbed quoting Stripes. Don't know which line.
Such a vehicle would be excellent for picking up girls in Minsk.
That's what I'll say as they pull my hearse around. But
Oh my gosh. Well, it's been an absolute privilege to be the smallest part of the Steve Spears support team on this. I'm so pleased for you that this book is coming out. I've read it cover to cover. It's fantastic. If you don't have one copy, you need at least two. And so I'll ask you, Steve, where can we get the book?
it should be available on Amazon.com, both as a ebook and as paperback. If you are not the Amazon kind of person, and I understand the controversy there, you could buy it at Barnes and Noble, I think, online, barnesandnoble.com, walmart.com. You could go to your local bookstore and ask them to order it for you. I think that'll work too. If you live in Tampa Bay, there's a bookstore in Dunedin called Back in the Day Books that carries it. And I believe our friend Gail in DC has copies of it at her Wonderland bookstore up in Bethesda, Maryland.
That would be amazing. So I'm going to start a GoFundMe to fund a coloring book version because I like to draw. But that is just, I'm so excited. I'm glad we got to talk today. It's kind of weird for me to be the interviewer of you for once. Maybe we'll try it again sometime.
You did a good job.
Oh, you're very kind. You're very kind.
You got a future in this, kid.
I don't know.
And don't worry, journalism is here to stay.
Well, until next time, Steve and I remain right here, hopelessly stuck in the 80s.